So I was at 94C, but just to remember, Socrates had asked whether there'd been anything other than the soul which governs in human beings. The word is here arcane, so it's like rules or governs in human beings. Simmius agreed, indeed I cannot. And then just carrying on from here, Socrates, and does she do so by embracing the affections of the body or by opposing them? So does the soul rule the body by opposing or embracing the affections of the body? Thus I mean this, such as when the body is hot and thirsty, the soul draws it to the opposite condition, to not drinking, and when the body is hungry, to not eating. And we certainly see countless other ways of the soul opposing the affections of the body. Or is that not the case? Simmius, it certainly is the case. And in turn, is it not the case that we previously agreed that if she were indeed a harmony, that is the soul, then she could in no way whatsoever sing opposite to the sounds caused by tightening, loosening, strumming, and those other experiences of which she happens to be feeling, since she must follow them and can never lead them. Let's do that again. If the soul is in harmony, then she could not in any way whatsoever sing opposite to the sounds caused by tightening, loosing, strumming, and those other experiences of which she happens to be feeling, since she must follow them and can never lead them. At the bit where it was said that the soul was a composite of parts, and that if those parts did anything, the soul would also have to do that, because the soul is just a collection of them, if it was a harmony. So if there's the sounds, oh, I get it, right. So if the harmony is composed of different sounds, for example, a sound which is caused by tightening, a sound which is caused by loosening, or a sound which is caused by strumming, then the resulting harmony cannot be opposed by the soul, because the soul as a harmony is a composite. So soul as harmony is composite, and so if it's made up of these parts, and then if parts are tightened, implies that soul must follow. And also be tightened. And these parts are sounds, although he calls them experiences. What's it say in my other translation at 94C? It says, on the other hand, we previously agreed that if the soul were a harmony, it would never be out of tune with the stress and relaxation and the striking of the strings or anything else done to its composing elements, but it would follow and never direct them. So here we go. The soul is following, and yet it is governing or ruling if soul is harmony. So here we got follow versus rule, and rule human body, and follow effect on sounds. Sorry, I think that's spelled with an E. Effect on sounds. We did so agree. How could we not have that they are affected, that the soul must follow the constituent parts if it's a harmony? What now? Does she appear to us to be acting in quite the opposite way when she rules all those affections of which she is said to be composed? And so by opposing nearly all but a few throughout all of life, and by mastering all their ways on the one hand at times, she corrects more harshly with the suffering that accompanies physical training and medical treatments. But then at other times she corrects more gently. Then again she uses threats. But then at other times she advises by having a dialectical conversation with the desires and angers and fears, as if she were one resource talking to another. Well, what does that all mean? In the other translation, 94D, well, does it now appear to do quite the opposite, ruling all over the elements of which one says it is composed, opposing nearly all of them throughout life, directing all their ways, inflicting harsh and painful punishment on them, at times in physical culture and medicine, at other times more gently by threats and exhortations, holding converse with desires and passions and fears as if it were one thing talking to a different one. Okay, so my trouble with this is that I get that the soul was ruling the human being up here. Is there being anything other than the soul which governs in human beings? And then the soul opposes the affections of the body. So it rules the human body. This is oppose affections of the body. Right. It certainly is the case. And in turn, is it not the case that we previously agreed that if the soul were indeed a harmony, then she could in no way whatsoever sing opposite to the sounds caused by tightening, loosening, or strumming and the other experiences of which she happens to be feeling? Pascoi. Since she must follow them and can never lead them. If the soul is a harmony, then whatever the sounds are within her. Okay, so sound is if it was a harmony sound, but obviously if the soul is a harmony, it's not a harmony of sounds, but it's a harmony of something. And what those things are the constituents of that harmony. And some of them will experience one way and others will experience different ways, and altogether they compose a harmony, which is what is being called a soul. But if all these parts felt happy, then the soul would have to feel happy in the sense that the soul is just the makeup of these parts. But then it says here, she appears to us to be acting in quite the opposite way when she rules all those affections. So it's now still seeing that so soul is still being seen as made up of different affections. These are now affections. And this is a soul. In the harmony, these are it as harmony, the affection, the soul, as harmony, the soul follows. The affections. However, instead, the soul rules the affections. So we've got follows here in the harmony, and here we've got rules. Which is when she says it's acting in quite the opposite way when she rules all those affections of which she is said to be composed. And so by opposing nearly all but a few throughout all of life, and by mastering all their ways, on the one hand at times she corrects more harshly with the suffering that accompanies physical training and medical treatments. But then at other times she corrects more gently. Then again she uses threats, but then at other times she advises by having a dialectical conversation with the desires and angers and fears, as if she were one resource talking to another. In the other translation, it's not one resource, it is as if it were one thing talking to a different one. Yeah. Such as Homer wrote in the Odyssey, where he says that Odysseus thus struck his breast, correcting his heart by advising, "Endure it, surely, my heart, for you have endured other things far worse at other times." So that's him ruling his heart. Odysseus ruling his heart. Accordingly then, do you think that when the poet wrote this, he understood the soul as being a harmony which is also led by the affections of the body, and not rather as leading and mastering them, since by the soul being according to herself, she is also a much more divine resource than harmony. So soul rules affections. And more divine than harmony. Yes, by Zeus, to me at least it appears so, O Socrates. Take notice then, O my noble friend, we can no longer maintain in a beautiful way that soul is harmony, for, as it is reasonable, then we would neither agree with the divine poet Homer, nor with our very own selves. It has to be in this way. Very well then. On the one hand, the followers of the Theban harmony have somehow become gracious or propitious in a measured way to us, as it is reasonable. Whereas on the other hand, how and by what logos, O Cebes and Simmias, can we truly gain favour from the followers of Cadmus? Right, so we've got Theban and we've got Cadmus. What's all that about? Where are we? About 95a. Just check first the other translation, see if it's got any notes about this. So 95a. Therefore, my good friend, pardon me, very well, said Socrates, Harmonia of Thebes seems somehow reasonably propitious to us. How and by what argument, my dear Cebes, can we propitiate Cadmus? Right, so it says here in the notes, Harmonia was in legend the wife of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. So he is founder of Thebes. And he had a wife called Harmonia. Okay. Socrates' punning joke is simply that, having dealt with harmony, we must now deal with Cadmus. So who's Theban in this? There was a list somewhere of all the people in the dialogue. So we're at 95a. So if I go to the beginning and look for Theban, yes indeed, Simmias the Theban, and both Cebes and Phaedonides. Were some foreigners present? Yes indeed, Simmias the Theban, and both Cebes and Phaedonides. Are they all Theban? That's a 59c. Yes, Simmias from Thebes with Cebes and Phaedonides. Right, so they're all Theban, as far as I can tell. Simmias definitely is, probably Cebes, according to 59c. So Simmias definitely is. Cebes, maybe. And who's he been talking to here? Simmias. Very well then. On the one hand, the followers of the Theban harmony have somehow become propitious in a measured way to us, as it is reasonable. Whereas, on the other hand, how and by what logos or CBs can we truly gain favour from the followers of Cadmus? CBs, it appears to me that you will find a way. You have certainly dealt with the logos about harmony in a wonderful way to me. almost as if beyond belief. For when Simmias was speaking of his difficulties, I was very much wondering if anyone would be able to provide whatever was required for the logos of self, of harmony. Reasoning of harmony, 95b. With his argument, for his logos, his argument. And then it suddenly appeared to me in a marvelous way that the logos of harmonia could not sustain the first approach of your logos reasoning. And so surely then I would not be amazed if the logos of Cadmus suffered the same fate. O good friend, do not boast, lest some jealousy be set in motion to overturn our destined logos. However, on the one hand, surely then we leave these matters to the care for the god. Melese. Surely we leave these matters to the care for the god. However, we leave that to the care of the god. But on the other hand, let us proceed in Homeric fashion. Let us pierce right through. What's that from? The argument at hand. So let us pierce right through the argument at hand to see if there is anything that accords with what you say. There's a little side note here. I think I'm going to skip it. Cadmus was the founder of Thebes. Right, okay, skipping all of that. So where were we? We're going to proceed in Homeric fashion. Let us just write through the argument at hand to see if there's anything that accords with what you say. And then, but surely then the main point of what you seek is that it is worth demonstrating that our soul is indeed immortal and indestructible. So now we've got CBs. Is soul immortal? 1. And indestructible? 2. And we're at 95C. So that if a philosophic person who is about to die is supremely confident in the face of death that they will also lead a better life in Hades than if they had died while living differently in vicious way, is not being unintelligently confident and foolish in his confidence. Thus it is worthwhile to reveal to the light of day why it is that the soul is mighty and a divine idea, and that she was, even way before we came to be human beings, exists before human life. Yet you say all this does not keep her from being immortal, but only reveals that the soul is long-lasting and that she existed at some time before, for an extraordinary amount of time, and that she knew and did many things. Right, so CB's argument is, as Socrates is putting it, soul exists for a long time, as opposed to forever. But for all that, she was no more immortal, even though she had existed for an extraordinary amount of time and that she knew and did many things. But for all that, she was no more immortal. So, not immortal. But her very entrance into the human body was the beginning of her destruction, just as if she were a disease. She would live that life in distress and would, in the end, be destroyed indeed in what we call death. Thus you say that it surely makes no difference whether she enters a body once or many times, in regard to the fear in each of us indeed. For you say that it is proper to be afraid if one is not unintelligent, neither knowing nor being able to give proof that the soul is immortal. Such things, I think, is what you maintain, O Cebes, and I deliberately repeat it often, in order that not any point may escape us. You may add or subtract anything if you wish. But there is nothing that I, at least, want to either subtract or add at the present moment, said Cebes, for this is what I said or meant. Phaedo. After that, Socrates was self-absorbed in reflection for a long time and contemplating, examining, considering about something. Then he said, "It is no thoughtless matter that you seek, O Cebes, for the cause of generation and destruction needs to be wholly and thoroughly investigated." So we have a cause of generation and a cause of destruction. And this is what we're going to look at. This is what the investigation is going to be about. And that's basically at 96. Thus, I, if indeed you wish, will give to you my personal experience concerning what? 96. In these matters, in this. Thereafter, should something that I say may come to light useful to you, make use of it to persuade us of that which you say. But I truly do indeed wish that, said Socrates. Listen then as I tell you, O Cebes, for when I was young I was in a wonderful condition, as I was eager to possess that wisdom, which they surely call the study of physics. Or nature, is it? Physios. For it appeared to me to be a splendid thing to know the causes of each thing. Through what does each thing come to be, and through what does it dissolve, and through what does it remain in existence? And often I myself changed up and down in the investigation with questions such as these. In the first place, at the time living creatures are formed, does it really happen when heat and cold bring about some decay, as some say? And does it happen through the blood, or through the air, or through fire? Or on the one hand, if it is through none of these by which we have mind, or on the other hand, if it is the brain which produces the perceptions of hearing and of sight and of smell. Then out of these memory comes to be, and opinion. Then out of memory and opinion, quietness takes hold. Then out of this quietness, knowledge comes into being. And in turn, by investigating how these perish and what happens to things in heaven and on earth in this way, finally I myself came to believe that this kind of investigation is naturally unsuited by being of no use. Thus I will give you sufficient proof of this. For at that time I was severely blinded by this investigation of what I clearly knew then, and also of what I knew before, as it appeared to both myself and to others. It was if I had been unlearned, and even of those things I thought I knew before, about many other things, and specifically through what do men grow. Since before this happened, I thought it was obvious to everyone that it was through eating and drinking that men grew. Growth of man. So we've got eating and drinking. For on the one hand, whenever one adds flesh to flesh from the food one eats, on the other hand, one adds bones to bones, and this way, according to the same line of reasoning, other parts were also added to each of the other appropriate parts of the body. Then from having a lesser mass at the time before, one has now become a greater mass, and in this way the smaller human becomes greater. I thought in this way at that time. Does it not appear to you that I believed in a measured way? At least I do, said Cebes. Then please still consider the following, for I thought that my opinion was sufficient, that whenever a tall man appeared standing by a short man, he was taller by a head, and that a horse was taller than a horse in the same way, and even more manifestly clear than these examples. Indeed, it appeared to me that 10 was more than 8 because 2 had been added to them, and that a 2-cubit length is larger than a cubit because it surpasses it by half of it. Right, let's take a look at these examples. So he thought that when a tall man is standing by a short man, taller by a head, taller by a head. That's one example. What else have we got? And a horse is taller than a horse in the same way. Fine. And 10 was more than 8. 10 is greater than 8 by 2. 2-cubit length. So this 2-cubit length is greater than a 1-cubit length. This is 2 cubits. This is 1 cubit. It is greater than that by half of it. By half of it, this half, which is 1 cubit, which is the bit there's excess. So let me just draw that in. This is the excess. Where excess of 1 cubit. So, okay, and then also we've got the horse one here, which is, and then the bigger one. I don't know why they don't look like horses. What, done a good job. Something like that. Okay, these are the horses. Right, what then truly appears to you now about these things? By Zeus, I am so far from thinking that I know the cause of those events, of which I will not even allow myself to comment, regarding the meeting of neighbours with each other, that when any one is added to one, either the one to which the addition was made has become two, or the one which was added, or the one added and the one which was added to become two through the addition of one to the other. Right. Well, regarding of meeting of neighbours with each other, that when one is added to one, okay, so you have one added to one. Right, so then it says, either the one to which the addition was made has become two. Right, so if it's 1 plus 1, then this is the one that the addition is made to. So this guy here goes here, and then you have, let's put them in boxes. So this is possibility A. Let's get rid of these. So this is 1, add 1. This is possibility 1, and it's 1 goes this way. The one being added to the original. So this is the original, and this is the additional. So that is added to that one, which then results in 2. That's possibility 1. Or the one which was added. Right, so what have we got? When any one is added to 1, either the one to which the addition was made has become 2, or the one which was added. So possibility 2 is that you have this one and it goes here. And therefore you end up with this 2. Okay? Or the one added and the one which was added to become 2 through the addition of one to the other. Right, so this is option 3, where you have this one here goes to meet this one, and this one here goes to meet this one, and then that results in this, which is the 2 of them together. 2. Right. For I wonder if, on the one hand, when each of them was separate from each other, each was accordingly one, and they were not at that time 2, but that, on the other hand, when they were brought near to one another, they became the cause, that became the cause of their becoming 2. So nearness or closeness. as cause of two ones becoming a two. I hope that makes sense. As in, they become closer in the middle, or this one's got closer to the one there, or this one's got closer to the original guy. In either case, they become two through closeness, because when they're separated, they're just two ones rather than 1, 2. So, nor indeed can I any longer be persuaded that when any one self is parted, that the self parting has become in turn the cause of her being able to become two. For she becomes opposite to the cause that became two at that time. Well, what does it mean? The one is parting. 97a. I'm going to check the other translation. Nor can I any longer be persuaded that when one thing is divided, this division is cause of its becoming two. For just now the cause of becoming two was the opposite. Nice. So how did it become two? So now we've got so that's addition. So now we look at division. So let's say you've got this circle, which is, we were using a square before, so got square. How am I going to represent this? Okay, forget the way I did it before. Let's just do it as a circle. So one circle divide by 2 or split in half. So then you have becomes and here but now you have two pieces, one cake, let's say. Now you have two pieces, so now you have two, but through separation. Yeah, I can see how that doesn't make any sense, because here it was through approaching, through approach. Approach in addition makes two, and they're two together. I suppose they're distinct, and here they're together but indistinct. You only know that there are two once you separate. Right, okay. So I see his dilemma there. One's approach, one's separation, and both result in two. So that that one parting is become in turn the cause of her being able to come two, for she becomes opposite to the cause that became two at the time. For on the one hand, at that time, that came to be by bringing them near to each other and by adding the one to the other. But now, on the other hand, that happens because one is taken away and separated from the other. According to the mode of this investigation, neither can I still persuade myself that I indeed know through what a unit exists, or how anything else either becomes or perishes, or remains in existence by this one method. But since I have yet another mixed up mode of investigation that is familiar to me, in no way will I ever accept that method. Then, on the one hand, once upon hearing, as he said, from a book of Anaxagoras, who proclaims that it is through mind that the cosmos is ordered and the cause of all. Okay, so we have 97c, Anaxagoras said what? Through the mind, cosmos is order. Cosmos ordered by mind, and the cause of all was mind. Mind, cause of all. That I was truly delighted with this cause, and in some way it appeared to me to contain the correct way, that mind is the cause of all, and I was led to believe that if this was in this way, that if the mind orders, then surely it would have to direct everything, and to arrange each and everything in the best way that this should be in. If then one wished to find the cause of each thing, in what way it comes to be, or perishes, or remains in existence, it would be necessary to discover this about the mind. 97. I was delighted with this cause, and it seemed to me good in a way that mind should be the cause of all. I thought that if this were so, the directing mind would direct everything and arrange each thing in the way that was best. If then one wished to know the cause of each thing, why it comes to be, or to be acted upon, or to act. Pardon me. If then one wished to know the cause of each thing, why it comes to be, or perishes, or exists, one had to find what was the best way for it to be, or to be acted upon, or to act. What is the best way for it to be, or to be acted upon, or in any way by another, or for it to act. Surely then, out of this reasoning, what is either excellent or best, and out of no other, is it proper for humans to investigate about this and other things? The best way. then if one wished to find the cause of each thing, then you have to look at what the best way for the self to be, or to be acted upon in any way by another, or for it to act of its own accord. Surely then, out of this reasoning, what is either excellent or best, and out of no other, is it proper for humans to investigate what is either excellent or best. Thus, this same self-logos must necessarily also recognize that which is inferior or subordinate, for these things belong to the same knowledge. So knowledge of what's best and knowledge of best and worst. As I reasoned about these things, I believed that I had truly discovered in Anaxagoras the master of the cause of beings, according to my own intellect, and that he would tell me first of all, on the one hand, whether the earth is flat or round, and then when he had told me, on the hand, he would thoroughly explain not only the cause, but also the necessity, by explaining that which is better. Necessity of a cause as it being better that way. That's 97E. And that it was better to be self-intellect in such a way. It was better for it to be in that way, in such a way. Right, so he would explain whether the earth is flat or round, and then he would explain the cause of it being flat or round, or also the necessity. So you got the earth. This is round. Well, it's nice to know that thousands of years later, the debate still rages. Flat. And it was better. Right, so then explain the cause. So the earth is either round or flat. So, either A, round, or B, flat. So if A cause, what's the cause? And necessity, and it's better that way. Which then, there would have to be a reason for something being better. So you'd have to give a reason, I think. If it was what's the cause? And is it necessity in that it's better that way? Okay. And if he said it was in the middle, then he would thoroughly explain that it was better for it to be in the middle. And if he would have revealed these things to me, that I was prepared never again to long for another kind of cause, and that I was truly prepared to learn by inquiry in the same way about the sun and the moon and the other heavenly bodies in this same way, about their speed and revolutions relative to each other, and whatever else happened to them in whatever way at any time, that each active or passive condition is better. For I never would have thought that Anaxagoras, who indeed asserted that these, whatever, that have been under the direction of mind, would bring in any cause for them, other than that they are best maintained in this way, just as they have to be. Best maintained. Best maintained in this way. Just as they have to be. Okay. Then once he had assigned to the cause to each and to all things in common, I thought he would go on to thoroughly explain the very best for each and the common good for all, and I would not have given up my hopes for a fortune. So I very eagerly acquired his books, reading them as quickly as I was able to, in order to know the very best and the inferior as quickly as I was able to. Surely then that wonderful hope was taken away, O companion, and gone from me from the first time that I proceeded to read, since on the one hand I saw the man made no use of intellect. So Anaxagoras, according Anaxagoras. So according to states no intellect. Socrates states no intellect. Nor did he charge it with any responsibility for the management of reality, but on the other hand charged as causes air and ether and water and many other absurd causes. So the causes, no intellect, because the causes are actually things like air, water, etc., which are more like how things work, I think. How versus why things are. I don't know that that's what is in the book, that's what I'm saying though. And he seemed to me to have been affected in the very same way as one who would say that all the actions of Socrates would be due to intellect, but then, in trying to explain the causes of each thing that I do, first says on the one hand that I am now sitting here through these, because my body is composed out of bones and sinews, and on the one hand the bones are solid and are separated by joints from each other, but on the other hand the sinews are such as to stretch and relax, surrounding the bones along with the flesh and skin, by which they are held together, thus as the bones are hung in their own sockets that slacken and tighten by the sinews, I suspect, and enable me to bend my joints, as I do at the present time, and that through this cause I happen to be sitting here with my legs crossed together. And in turn he mentions other causes concerning our discourse with each other, such as sounds and air and hearing, and countless other such causes, while thoughtlessly failing to mention as the actual cause that, ever since it appeared better to the Athenians for me to be condemned, and truly through this it has appeared better to me in turn to sit here, and that it was more just to remain here to undergo the sentence they should order. So, cause of Socrates in prison. And so Socrates says, one, it's appeared better to Athenians to condemn him, and better to me in turn, better for Socrates, better for Socrates to remain, and more just to undergo sentence ordered. Otherwise, as it seems to me at least, by the dog, Hermes, the god of travellers. Is that part of the text? No. Neton kuna. Long ago, these sinews and bones would have been on their way towards Megara or Boeotia, being carried by the opinion of what is the best course, if I did not know that it is more just and more beautiful to undergo any sentence the city may order, instead of running away and escaping. More just to undergo versus running away and escaping. But yeah, it's only because he's made that choice, that judgment even. So this is better for versus better. That involves judgment through intellect or through mind. But on the other hand, to call such things causes is quite absurd. I got into that one. But on the other hand, if someone said that without having such things, I don't know which bit he's referring to, the one that he just said or the other thing that's in use. Well, I'll read on, hopefully it becomes clear. On the one hand, to call such things causes is quite absurd. But on the other hand, if someone said that without having such things, and bones and sinews and other things as far as I have, I would not be able to do that which appeared proper to me, they would be right. So they are necessary. So the bones, sinews, etc., plus the judgment are what? Without such things, I would not be able to do that which appeared proper to me. Without these, so these are necessary. But surely to say that it is because of this reasoning that I do that which I do these things with intelligence, but not with a view to that which is best, would be the reasoning of a prodigiously indifferent way. For since they are not able to discern on the one hand why the cause is in reality one entity, whereas on the other hand that the good without which the cause would not ever be the cause is another. Right. So what's this mean? We're at 99b. Check the other translation. 99b. If someone said that without bones and sinews and all such things I should not be able to do what I decided, he would be right. But surely to say that they are the cause of what I do, and not that I have chosen the best cause, that I've chosen the best course, even though I act with my mind, is to speak very lazily and carelessly. Imagine not being able to distinguish the real cause from that without which the cause would not be able to act as a cause. It is what the majority appear to do. So there's a distinction between that which is the cause and that without which the cause would not be able to act as such. So cause well, I think actually this is that without which cause could not act as a cause. That without which cause could not act as a cause, and here we have judgment is the cause. Right, but surely to say that this is because of this reasoning that I do that which I do, and do these things with intelligence, but not with a view to that which is best, would be the reasoning of a prodigiously indifferent way. For since they are not able to discern on the one hand why the cause is in reality one entity, whereas on the other hand that without which the cause would never ever be the cause is another, and then they get confused between the two, and that which the majority truly appeared to me to do, just as if they were groping in the dark when they call it a cause, thus imposing a foreign name to it. And for which reason, surely then on the one hand, one man surrounds the earth with a vortex under heaven to make another stretches out the air to overlook it as if it were a wide abyss. But since they neither investigate the power by which they are now disposed in the best possible way, nor do they believe it has a spiritual force, but they are led to believe that they will find at some time a stronger and more immortal latter-day Atlas to hold everything together even more, and they neither believe that the good must truly bind and hold things together. On the one hand, I would have gladly become the disciple of any man who may have possessed in some way, at some time, that kind of cause. But on the other hand, since I was deprived of this, and neither did I myself discover this, nor did I happen to learn of such a nature from another, do you wish for me to give you a demonstration of the search with which I busied myself in my second quest for the cause, O Cebes? Is his second quest for the cause. Which is at 99D. Cebes, I do wish it above all else. Now then, after this, when I had averted my first Anaxagorean quest search from natural existence, it appeared to me that I must necessarily be careful to avoid that very experience of those who watch and look upon an eclipse of the sun, for some of them may ruin their eyes if they do not look at the image of it in water, of the sun in water, or something like that. And I envisage something such as this happening to me, looking at the sun. It can result in, this is like dangerous or can blind. And I feared that my soul may be altogether blinded if I were to look at realities with my eyes, and if I tried to grasp them with each of my senses. It appeared to me then that I must necessarily take refuge in the Logos, and in those seek the truth of real beings. Thus, on the one hand, perhaps the image which I liken is not done in a fitting way, for I do not at all grant that one who seeks realities in the Logos is concerned with images, any more than one who seeks them in deeds. But surely then I did begin in this way, by also using the Logos as a hypothesis in each case, which I discerned to be the most sound. I would on the one hand consider as being true about cause and about every other real being, which appeared to me to be in tune with this Logos, and on the other hand consider as not true whatever was not. But I want to make my meaning more clear to you, for I believe that now you do not yet learn. Cebes, no, by use not very well. So what was he talking about here? 100A. He feared that his soul would be blinded if I feared that my soul would be altogether blinded if I looked at things with my eyes and tried to grasp them with each of my senses. So I thought I must take refuge in discussions, or logos in this case, and investigate the truth of things by means of words. However, perhaps this analogy is inadequate, for I certainly do not admit that one who investigates things by means of words is dealing with images any more than one who looks at facts. However, I started in this manner, taking as my hypothesis in each case the theory that seemed to me the most compelling. I would consider us true about cause and everything else, whatever agreed with this, and as untrue whatever did not so agree. But I want to put my meaning more clearly, for I do not think that you understand me now. Right. No, by Zeus, not very well, said Socrates. But it is nothing new. What I mean is this, but it is also just as always, what I have never stopped saying in the earlier discussion accounts and at other times. For I am truly going to try to set out to demonstrate to you the idea of the cause which I have busied myself, and I will refer back to those often murmured songs and begin from them. By hypothesizing that a certain beauty exists, self according to self, and the good and the great and all the others, which if you willingly grant me and also agree that they exist, then, as a result, I hope to demonstrate and that you will discover the cause that the soul is immortal. Right. So it's a hypothesizing that certain beauty exists in and of itself, and the good and the great and all the others. So beauty itself. But mustn't forget that this is like, it's a hypothesis. It's not something known. It's a belief of some kind. It's a hypothesis. The beauty itself exists. As do good, good itself, great itself, and so on and so forth. And then he is going to hope to demonstrate, and he will discover the cause that the soul is immortal. CB, surely then take it as being granted to you, and do not delay or linger with its fulfillment. Socrates. Consider then the next thing in order after that, if it appears to you as it does to me. For it has come to light for me that if there is anything whatsoever that is beautiful, beside the beauty, besides the beautiful self itself, it is beautiful by no one other than because it partakes of that beauty. So a beautiful thing, this, oh wow, it's so beautiful, this beautiful thing, beautiful thing, partakes in beauty itself. And surely then I say that it is in this way with everything. Do you agree that there is such a cause? I do so agree. Now then, I am no longer able to understand or recognize those other sophisticated causes, but if someone should tell me that anything whatsoever which is beautiful, either because it has a bright color or shape or any other such thing whatsoever, then on the one hand, I ignore these other causes, for all these stir up trouble for me. But on the other hand, as for myself, I hold on simply and plainly, and perhaps simple-mindedly, to this, that not anything else makes it beautiful than that presence, or the commonality of that, a beautiful thing, so therefore partakes in beauty itself. So cause of beauty is presence, and commonality. The presence or the commonality of that. That all beautiful things come beautiful by the beautiful. Presence, commonality, presence of and commonality with beauty itself. And then he adds, so nothing else makes it beautiful than that presence or the commonality of that, and thus in whatever way she becomes attached. For I no longer rely on this relationship, but only that all beautiful things become beautiful by the beautiful. All beautiful things become beautiful. All beautiful things become beautiful by the which is basically beauty itself. For example, this little quote that I've done is a demonstration of that, because it's so beautiful. It must have some, all that lovely glitter there, so beautiful. It's become that because it's in the presence of and has a commonality with beauty itself. And so it's by the beautiful. For this relationship appears to me to be the safest answer I can give to myself or anyone else. And if I keep hanging on to this, I am led to believe that I shall never fall into error, since this is the safe answer, both that I separated out for myself and for anyone else. So this is a safe answer. So it's a safe answer, but it's also what, not wrong. I am led to believe never will fall in error. Believe will not fall in error. that beautiful things are beautiful by the beautiful, or does it not appear to you that this is the case? It does so appear. And accordingly, it is by magnitude that great things are great and greater things greater, and by smallness that lesser things are lesser? Yes. Accordingly, neither should you accept the statement if anyone told you that one person is taller than another by a head, and the shorter is shorter by that same measure. But you would solemnly protest on the one hand that you mean nothing else than that every great thing is greater than another by nothing else than greatness, and is greater by this through the greatness magnitude. And on the other hand, lesser is lesser by nothing else than smallness. So that was the example of the tall person. Where were they? Wow, that was ages ago. Here. So here it's actually taller due to tallness itself. So we have it again here. This guy taller than this guy. A taller than B due to partaking in tallness itself. And on the other hand, the lesser is lesser by nothing else than smallness, and through this it is lesser, through smallness, by fearing, I suppose, what the opposing logos may counter to you if you declare someone to be greater or lesser. By a head, first of all, on the one hand, the greater is greater and the lesser is lesser. Let's do that bit again because that doesn't make sense. So, right, so greater thing is greater than another by nothing else than greatness, and is greater by this through the greatness or magnitude. And on the other hand, the lesser is lesser by nothing else than smallness, and through this it is lesser, through smallness. By fearing, I suppose, what the opposing account may counter to you if you declared someone to be greater or lesser by a head. First of all, on the one hand, the greater is greater and the lesser is lesser. By the same measure, then, on the other hand, the greater is greater by a head, which is small, and this would be truly monstrous, namely that something is made great by something that is small. Or would you not be afraid of this? 101A. Isn't it by the addition of something small? And you would, so this is the other translation, 101a. And you would not accept the statement that one man is taller than another by head, and the shorter man shorter by the same, but you would bear witness that you mean nothing else than that everything that is bigger is made bigger by nothing else than by bigness, and that it is the cause of its being bigger, and the smaller is made smaller only by smallness, and this is why it is smaller. I think you would be afraid that some opposite argument would confront you if you said that someone is bigger or smaller by a head. First, because the bigger is bigger and the smaller smaller by the same. Then, because the bigger is bigger by a head, which is small. And this would be strange, namely that someone is made bigger by something small. Right. So, taller, okay, versus, so the other way of dealing with this. I can't tell what colour that is. That's still yellow. Why is that yellow? Okay, one moment. Sorry about this. Okay. So we have that versus A and B again. And then we have the measure of a head and the other person. So this and this and this. So these are the measurements. And so you got A and you got B, and A is, and this here is a head. It could be any measure, it could be a meter, I guess. A is taller than B by a head. And so, what are the problems with this? Socrates states problems with this approach. So, he says, if you declared someone to be greater or lesser by a head, first of all, the greater is greater and the lesser is lesser by the same measure. So it's taller and, well, A is taller and B is shorter by a head. So it explains both tallness and shortness. And the greater is greater by head. And so two head ahead is small, which therefore A is taller by something by something small. Well, I don't know that that's really a problem. Why is it a problem that something small makes something big? Because it's adding to something that already exists, but in any case, he says this would be truly monstrous, namely that something is made great by something that is small. Or would you not be afraid of this? Laughing. Oh, indeed. Oh, maybe it's a joke. Sorry, I don't get the humour. Socrates. Is it not the case then that you should be afraid to say that 10 is more than 8 by 2, and that this is the cause of the excess, but not by quantity and through quantity? Plethos. Isn't that through plentiness? The excess is caused by plentifulness. And that 2 cubits is greater than 1 cubit by half, and not through magnitude. Megathe. Mega. For this is certainly the same fear. Well, yeah, I can see that that's the same, so I won't draw it out. But you giving the cause as that which makes it that quality. When you compare 8, when you compare 10 and 8, if you're speaking about 10, then it is more than 8. It is more plentiful than 8. Therefore, it partakes more in plenty itself than 8 does. And so the cause of the excess between, which is the difference between 10 and 8, is the fact that the 10 partakes more in plentifulness. And the cause of 2 cubits, when compared to 1 cubit, it is larger, but it is larger by a half. But isn't that like saying it's larger by a head? How can it be greater by something lesser? Is a half lesser? Or was that just a joke? Or that 2 cubits is bigger than 1 cubit by half, and not by bigness? Well, I don't get that one. I thought that's got the same problem. Why is 2 cubits is bigger than 1 cubit by being more plentiful, just like the 10 and 8 were? Then you would be afraid to say that 10 is more than 8 by 2, and that this is the cause of the excess, and not magnitude, and because of magnitude. Oh, right, okay. He's saying the opposite thing than what I thought he was saying. Okay, I think that makes sense then. You would be afraid, as in if you now know this new way of talking, and that the things are due to the qualities themselves, then you would be afraid to say that 10 is more than 8 by 2. and that is the cause of the excess, the 2, instead of saying magnitude is the cause. And you would be afraid of saying that 2 cubits is bigger than 1 cubit by half, and rather than saying by bigness, which is the actual cause. Right, that makes sense. So reading it in this translation, then is it not the case then that you should be afraid to say that 10 is more than 8 by 2, and that this is the cause of the excess, but not by quantity and through quantity? No, in fact, quantity is the cause. And that 2 cubits is greater than 1 cubit by half, rather than through magnitude. So magnitude is the cause, as quantity is the cause. By quantity and through quantity. For this is certainly the same fear. Yes. Most certainly. And there's a reference to Nicomachus' Introduction to Arithmetic. Now then, the real beings, ton on ton, both those that are properly so called, and those that possess their name, such as those that are intelligible, and those that are sensible or perceptible, aistheton. Some of them are unified and continuous, such as a living being, the cosmos, a tree, and the like, which are properly and characteristically called magnitudes. Unified and continuous. Right, so we've got classes of things. So one class of things, we have the unified and continuous. Others are discontinuous and also in a side-by-side arrangement. So discontinuous and side by side. Does this mean discrete? And this is the side by side arrangement. Others are discontinuous and also in a side-by-side arrangement, as it were, in heaps, which are called multitudes, such as a flock, a people, a heap, a chorus, and the like. Alright, so we had living being, unified and continuous, living being, what else? Cosmos, a tree, and on this one we had flock of sheep. Okay, that's the best example. A people, a heap of stones, etc., etc. Okay. Accordingly, then, wisdom must be considered to be the knowledge of these 2 ideas. Right? What ideas? Then, since all multitude and all greatness are necessarily by their own nature unlimited, for on the one hand, multitude begins from a definite root and does not cease increasing, whereas on the other hand, the division of greatness begins from a definite wholeness and it can never cease the dividing process, but through this both proceed to infinity. So wisdom is the knowledge of these two ideas. Which two ideas? The idea of, what's the other translation say? Oh, is oh, okay. This is not actually Phaedo. That's unfair. I've been reading this. I didn't know. Right. So it's not just the reference to it. This is actually the text of Introduction to Arithmetic. So it is interesting. But I think I'm going to skip on to the actual dialogue, which would then, in this translation, says, then would you not avoid saying that when one is added to one, it is the addition? Right, yes, so it's this bit here. So then, what next? You would not carelessly undertake to say that when one is added to one, the addition is the cause of it becoming two, or when divided, the division is the cause. But you would loudly proclaim that you do not know how else each thing can come to be except by partaking of the characteristic of each essence of which each thing must participate. And in the case of two coming into being, you would not hold on to any other cause other than by the participation of the dyad or two-ness, and those that are to be two necessarily partake of this, and that which is to be one necessarily participate of the monad. But you would pay no attention to these divisions and additions and other such refinements, and leave them to those more sophisticated than yourself to answer. But you, by being afraid, as they say, of your own shadow and your lack of skill, by clinging to the safety of that hypothesis, would answer in this way. Right. So then this one approaching this one, which becomes two, this became two by two-ness itself. Or the dyad, as he was calling it. And equally, this one, which ended up being this and this, two halves, also became two by two-ness itself, the dyad. Then if someone attacked the hypothesis of this, you would not pay attention to that person and not answer until you had examined whether those consequences that follow would sound concordant to you or discordant with one another. But when you must necessarily give the account of that, you would deliberate in the same way by hypothesizing another hypothesis in turn, whichever comes to light best of the loftier ones, until you come upon something sufficient. But you should not mix the dry with the wet, just as the controversialists do by discussing the cause or principle and the effects therefrom at the same time, if indeed you wish to find any of the real real beings. For on the one hand, in regard to those, they equally neither give account of nor thought to, for being sufficiently enabled by their wisdom, they mix everything together and at the same time, being acceptable to themselves. But on the other hand, if indeed you are philosophically inclined, I think you will do as I say. Well, that definitely reminds me of when one person was describing the mixture of pleasure and pain at the same time towards the beginning of this dialogue. And I think it was Socrates that was saying that you couldn't have the same thing at the same place at the same time. So unless you had separate things in the same thing at the same place at the same time, unless you had two things, one which felt pain and one which felt pleasure, that means you were in two minds about something. Because if you were in one mind, you would make your mind up whether you were in pleasure or pain as a unity. I think that's the point there. I think I'll read this section 101C from the other translation just to see if it makes. I think I get it, but just to hear it in a different way. 101C. 101C, yeah. Then would you not avoid saying that when one is added to one, it is the addition, and when it is divided, it is the division that is the cause of two? And you would loudly exclaim that you do not know how else each thing can come to be except by sharing in the particular reality in which it shares. And in these cases, you do not know of any other cause of becoming two except by sharing in two-ness, and that the things that are to be two must share in this, as that which is to be one must share in oneness. And you would dismiss these additions and divisions and other such subtleties, and leave them to those wiser than yourself to answer. But you, afraid, as they say, of your own shadow and your inexperience, would cling to the safety of your own hypothesis and give that answer. If someone then attacked your hypothesis itself, you would ignore him and would not answer until you had examined whether the consequences that follow from it agree with one another or contradict one another. There's a footnote that says, alternatively, if someone should cling to your hypothesis itself, you would dismiss him and would not answer until you had examined whether consequences that follow from it agree with one another or contradict with one another. If someone attacked your hypothesis itself, you would ignore him and would not answer him until you had examined whether the consequences that follow must give an account of your hypothesis itself. You will proceed in the same way. You will assume another hypothesis, the one which seems to you the best of the higher ones, until you come to something acceptable. But you will not jumble the two as the debaters do by discussing the hypothesis and its consequences at the same time, if you wish to discover any truth. This they do not discuss at all, nor give any thought to, but their wisdom enables them to mix everything up, and yet to be pleased with themselves. But if you are a philosopher, I think you will do as I say. So that section is still confusing. then if someone attacked your hypothesis, you would not pay attention to that person and answer until you had examined whether the consequences that follow would sound concordant to you or discordant with another. But when you must necessarily give the account of that, you would deliberate in the same way, by hypothesizing another hypothesis in turn, whichever comes to the best of the loftier ones, until you come upon something sufficient. But you should not mix the dry with the wet, just as the controversialists do by discussing the cause and principle at the same time. All right. Simmias and Cebes at the same time. Ye speak most truthfully. Oh, okay. Where was I? All right, here you speak most truthfully. Echecrates. Yes, by Zeus, so Phaedon, reasonably so indeed, for it appeared to me that he explained those matters in a wonderfully clear way, even to anyone in possession of a small amount of intelligence. Phaedon, by all means so, O Echecrates, and it did so appear to all those present. Echecrates, and so to those of us who were not present, but hear of it now. But what then? What was said after that? As I think then, after these discussions or accounts had been accepted by Cebes himself, and it was also agreed that each one of the ideas exists, and that other things acquired their name by participating of them themselves, surely then, after that, Socrates asked, surely then, if you say this is in this way, then accordingly, when you say that Simmias is taller than Socrates, but shorter than Phaedo, do you not mean at that time that there exists in Simmias both greatness and smallness? I do at least. Right, so we got Simmias is taller than Socrates, but shorter than Phaedon. Simmias So you got Simmias, Phaedo, and Socrates. And so you've got Simmias is, so you've got Phaedo is greater than Simmias, and Simmias is greater than Socrates. Or Socrates is smaller than Simmias, who is smaller than Phaedo. And we're now at 102b. But you certainly agree that the statement, as stated in the words, Simmias surpasses Socrates, do not possess the truth of the matter, For surely it is not in the nature of Simmias to surpass because he is Simmias, but through the magnitude which Simmias happens to possess. Nor again does he surpass Socrates because Socrates is Socrates, but because of the smallness that Socrates possesses in relation to the magnitude of that other. Simmias surpasses Socrates. But it's not because of Simmias, equally not because of Socrates. And instead you do not possess the truth of the matter, for surely it is not in the nature of Simmias to surpass because he is Simmias, but through the magnitude which Simmias happens to possess. So it's not because of Simmias, but because Simmias partakes in magnitude. Equally, nor again does he surpass Socrates because Socrates is Socrates, but because of the smallness that Socrates possesses in relation to the magnitude of the other, but because Socrates partakes in smallness, but then it's also added in relation to one another. In relation to, so you got that in relation to that. Because he partakes in smallness in relation to Phaedo. So, is that confusing? True, said Socrates. Nor indeed again is he to some degree surpassed by Phaedo, by reason of Phaedo being Phaedo, but because of the magnitude which Phaedo possesses in relation. So this is relative to the shortness of Simmias. That is the case. Accordingly, then, in this way, Simmias is named short and tall, which he possesses by being in the middle of both, on the one hand, supplying the shortness to be surpassed by the tallness, while on the other hand, presenting his tallness to overcome the shortness. And at the same time, smilingly said, sorry, that was Phaedo, and at the same time, smilingly said, Socrates, I seem to be talking like a book, but it certainly has to be indeed as I say. Phaedo, he agreed. Socrates, but I speak in this way because I wish that it appears to you in the same way as it does to me. For it has come to light for me that not only the great self will in no way come near to being, the great itself will in no way come near to being great and small at the same time, but also the great in us will never admit or receive the small, nor come near to being surpassed. But one of two things happens. Either it flees and withdraws when its opposite, the small, approaches it, or it is destroyed by the approach of that. Thus it will not abide the presence, nor receive the small, and be other than that which it was. Just as I receive and keep smallness, and still remain being just as I am this same small person, but that, being great, cannot undertake, bear, or endure to be small. Therefore, in the same way, and as the smallness in us is not ever willing to become nor to be great, neither does any other of the opposites become or be its opposite at the same time, and still remain being just as it was, but it either departs or is destroyed when that happens. What, so bigness, largeness comes in, and smallness goes, and then smallness comes in and largeness goes? But it seems to be in flux depending on who you're relating to. Thebes. It has come to light for me to be altogether in this way. Right. When one of those present heard this, I do not clearly remember who it was. He said, unknown person, by the gods, are not the statements just now given in direct opposition to what we agreed upon in our earlier discussion, that the greater arose out of the lesser, and the lesser from the greater, and that this was simply the generation of opposites from their opposites? Oh, I remember. So this was when it was like night turns into day, and day turns into night, just like sleep turns into awake, and you have to be asleep to become awake, and you have to be awake to become asleep, and you have to be alive to become dead, and you have to become dead to become alive. Or at least that's the theory. And so and that the greater arose out of the less, and the lesser from the greater, and that this was simply the generation of opposites from their opposites. But now it seems to me that we are saying that this could not ever happen. And hearing Phaedo, and hearing this, Socrates turned his head to listen and said, "You have bravely reminded us. However, you do not bear the difference in mind between that which is said now and what was said at that time. For on the one hand, at that time, we said that the opposite condition arose from its opposite condition, whereas on the other hand, now we say that the opposite thing could never become opposite to itself." Right. Oh, so it turned. So this doesn't. Sleep doesn't change, and being awake doesn't change. But the thing that is asleep changes to being awake. Is that what it means? We said that the opposite condition arose from its opposite condition, whereas on the other hand, now we say that the opposite itself could never become the opposite itself. It ever become opposite to itself. Neither that in us nor that in nature. We said that the opposite condition arose from its opposite condition. 103b. How's I call it? What 103b? On hearing this, Socrates inclined his head towards the speaker and said, "You have bravely reminded us, but you do not understand the difference between what is said now and what was said then, which was that an opposite thing came from an opposite thing. Now we say that the opposite itself could never become opposite to itself. An opposite thing came from an opposite thing." So is it that it needs a container? So there's a period of time called night. That is the container. It turns into a period of time called day. So these are things, and these things turn into the opposite condition, because these things are not they're not awakeness itself. They're just things that partake in awakeness that can change into things that partake in sleepiness. And Socrates now is talking about tallness itself cannot become smallness itself. But a tall thing can become a short thing. How does it do that? By standing next to someone even taller? I'm not sure about that. The opposite could never become opposite to itself, neither that in us nor that in nature. For at that time, my friend, on the one hand, we spoke about those that possess opposite conditions, that are themselves named after those conditions. So things that are named after those conditions. So this is a tall thing is named tall. So the tall becomes a short thing becomes named short, so that you then end up saying tall becomes short, and that's still okay as long as you know that it's just named this. It's not tallness itself. Just like earlier we saw that it's not Socrates that's taller, it's not Simmias that surpasses Socrates. It's not because of Simmias, which is just the name, or a container thing. That cannot be the cause, just like Socrates is a name, container, thing. So the name is the label for the container or thing, but that partakes in smallness, which is the real thing, that is the cause, real cause. Just like here, magnitude is the real cause. And the point is that these real causes, these real entities, in as much as they're not just containers, they will not partake of each other. The magnitude can never be small. Magnitude itself can never be smallness itself. and vice versa. So thing is like a container. Short thing like a container, which is then labeled short, labeled tall, which allows you to say tall becomes short and vice versa. So for that time, my friend, on the one hand, we spoke about those things that possess opposite conditions, they possess them, that are themselves named after those conditions. But now, on the other hand, we are talking about those things themselves by whose presence those that are named possess their name. It's the presence of shortness, named short, due to presence of shortness. And this is named tall due to presence of tallness. So now, on the other hand, we are talking about those being themselves whose presence those that are named possess their name. And furthermore, we say those being themselves cannot ever intend or wish to allow or accept their generation from each other. Right, so tallness itself does not generate. Tallness itself, I think we did it here actually. What was it? Tallness itself cannot become that or cannot generate or cannot. However, this one can, because we're talking about containers. And here, even though the words make it more ambiguous, we're still talking about containers. And if we're not, it can't work. Phaedo. And at the same time, while looking at CBC, said, accordingly then, certainly nothing that this man said also disturbs you, O CBs? Not at the moment, but then again, I have been disturbed, and certainly I say that such objections do often disturb me. Accordingly, then, we are altogether agreed about this, that an opposite will absolutely in no way whatsoever come to be opposite to itself. We are altogether agreed. Accordingly, then, consider if you will also agree with me on that which still follows. Is there something you call hot and cold? Of course I do. Are there then just as like ice and fire? By Zeus, not to me indeed. Oh, are they then just as ice and fire? So we got, okay, so we can do some great drawing here. We got hot, we got cold. Are they like ice and fire? And where is this? 103D. Are they then just like ice and fire? Just like. Oper, Kiona, Kai, Ap, Oper. By Zeus, not to me indeed. Since the heat is something other than fire, and the cold is something other than ice? Yes. But I suppose that it appears to you that the following is indeed the case, that ice will in no way be receptive of the heat, just as we said before, and still remain being that which it was, and be both ice and hot. But at the approach of the heat, it will either withdraw or be destroyed. So if hot, okay, so we have ice. Ice must partakes of cold. Then heat, if you apply heat to it, ice will no be receptive of the heat, just as we said before, and still remain that which it was, and be both ice and hot. But the approach of the heat, it will either withdraw or be destroyed. What will be ice? Ice will in no way be receptive of the heat. Just as we said before, and still remain being that which it was, and be both ice and hot. But at the approach of the heat, self will either be withdrawn or destroyed. Withdraw or destroyed. By all means, indeed. And indeed, fire in turn, at the approach of the cold, it will either go away or be destroyed, since it will never dare accept the coldness and still be just as it was, fire. Right, okay, so we got the opposite. Here we have fire, which partakes of heat. And this also will withdraw destroyed as you apply cold. And then we can do all the cool little colors. Fire, which takes part in heat. Okay. Still not seeing the relevance, but okay. Cebes, what you say is true. Socrates, accordingly then, in some such cases, that not only is the ideal self always throughout all time worthy of the name of self, but there is something else. What are we talking about? 103E. It is true then about some of these things that not only the form itself deserves its own name for all time, but there is something else that is not the form, but has its character whenever it exists. Perhaps I can make my meaning clearer. The odd must always be given this name we now mention. Is that not so? Right. So fire is not the form of heat. There's something else that is not the form, but has its character whenever it exists. So yeah, that's true. Fire is not heat itself. Is not heat itself, but has its character. But has its character. And equally, this is not cold itself, but has its character. Because otherwise, why does it withdraw or get destroyed? It's not like sleep and awake. Something asleep becomes something awake, and so sleep itself withdraws or is destroyed, but that sleepy person changes character. The fire doesn't change character. A person can change character from being sleepy. So changing character. So objects changing character. Humans definitely do. Humans, yes. Well, to the extent they do, yes. Obviously, fire and ice, not to the extent that they are like heat and cold. I guess they could change character in being smaller and bigger, that kind of character. But they're tied to heat and cold somehow. Why? I don't get it. Okay. I'll read on, maybe it will become clearer. According then, in some such cases, that not only is the idea itself always, throughout all time, worthy of the name of itself, but there are also other things which, on the one hand, are not those things themselves, but on the other hand, always maintain the form of that whenever they exist. But perhaps I can make my meaning still clearer in this way. For certainly the odd must always necessarily have this name, which we now mention. Or is that not the case? It certainly is. Accordingly, then, odd is the only thing among real beings. Nomon. For this is what I mean. Is there also something else which on the one hand is not just as the odd, but on the other hand, it is equally necessary to always call this thing odd also, the same also, along with its own name, because it is of such a nature, so as never to be separated from the odd. So objects objects of a nature so as never to be separated from a form itself. Something that's always beautiful. In this case, we're thinking about something odd, like 3. 3 is always odd. And so distinguishing between oddness itself is always odd. Thus, I mean, the 3 itself, which happens to be one example, and there are many more. I said 3. Consider then the case of the triad. Does it not accordingly appear to you that it is always called both by its own name and by that of the odd, which is not the very same as the triad, but it is nevertheless somehow thus brought forth 3 and 5 and half of the whole of number, so as not to be that which is just as the odd, yet each of themselves are always odd, and in turn those that are 2 and 4 and the whole other row of number in turn, while not being that which is just as the even, yet each of themselves are nevertheless always even. So odd itself versus odd things, such as 1, 3, 5, 7, even itself versus even things, such as 2, 4, 6, 8. But these can always be called always. These are always even. And equally, these are always odd. So they not only partake, it's like the tie here. This tie here partakes of heat is the important bit. It's like a chain that you can't break. It's not this usual partaking that is fluid. This is always tied to it. So how can I make that clearer? Because that is important. Do it in orange maybe. It's always stuck with partaking in this form. Just like these are always stuck with the odd. I don't know why, but it is true that they are. Always even. So what are these things? Objects of a nature so as never to be separated. Never to be separated from a form itself. What are they? Do you agree or not? Seabees. How could I not agree? Well, now then, observe that which I desired to make clear. Therefore, this is the case, that it has come to light that not only do these opposites not accept each other, but also as many of those beings that while they are not opposite to each other, yet they always possess the opposites. And it is reasonable that these in no way accept the idea whose essence is opposite to that which is in them, since when it approaches them, it will surely perish or withdraw. Shall we not say that those that are three will either abandon or comply to anything whatsoever before becoming even and still remain being three? Checking the other translation. Look now, what I want to make clear is this. Not only do those opposites not admit each other, but this is also true of those things which, while not being opposite to each other yet, while not being opposite to each other, yet always contain the opposites. And it seems that these do not admit that form which is opposite to that which is in them. When it approaches them, they either perish or give way. Shall we not say that three will perish or undergo anything before, while remaining three, becoming even? What I want to make clear is this. Not only do those opposites not admit each other, but this is also true of those things which, while not being opposite to each other, yet always contain the opposites. Right, so like evenness is opposite to oddness. Therefore, not only do these opposites not admit each other, yes, oddness doesn't admit evenness, and evenness doesn't admit of oddness. But this is also true of those things which, while not being opposite to each other, yet always contain the opposites. So the number two and the number three. Number two is not opposite to number three, but the number two contains evenness or partakes in evenness, and the number three partakes in oddness, which are opposites. And it seems that these do not admit that form which is opposite to that which is in them. So when it approaches them, they either perish or give way. That makes sense. Let's see this Balba. So not only do those opposites not accept each other, so evenness and oddness, they don't accept each other, but also as many of those beings that while they are not opposite to each other, and that's the example, number two and number three, yet they always possess the opposites. So two possesses evenness, three possesses oddness. And it is reasonable that these in no way accept that idea or form whose essence is opposite to that which is in them. So two will never admit oddness because it's opposite to its evenness. Three will never admit evenness because it's opposite to its oddness. So these in no way accept that idea whose essence is opposite to that which is in them, since when it approaches them, it will surely perish or withdraw. So two will no longer be two if it becomes odd. Shall we shall we not say that those that are three will either abandon or comply to anything whatsoever before becoming even, and still remain being three? Okay, 104C, I'll pick it up from there next time.